Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're one short of a quorum. We have a promise from Ben Eldridge that he's going to show up at 2:30. So we will go ahead and take care of some things before then that will help us move along. Appreciate y'all's bearing with us and apologize to the audience that you're having to sit out there and look at our boring faces while we get started here. Opening remarks. Bob Manning is joining us from beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico, where it's cool and dry. Bob, do you have any opening remarks for us?
Wish you were here. Not really.
Not really? You really don't wish we were there? All right, well, thanks for joining us. Northern, anything? Rich, Dell, anybody around this way? Okay, very good. First opportunity for public comment. Anybody on Zoom like to make a comment today? If you would raise your hand, Ms. Couch, or I'm not sure who the other person is.
It's me, Erica.
Oh, that's Ericayo. Okay, I got it now.
Yeah, me, Erica, yo.
Yo.
I wish I could be there. Hope
All right.
everyone is well.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir.
Anybody in the audience like to make a comment? Ms. Gerhardt?
Oh, me here.
3 minutes, please.
Yes. Lisa Hutt Gerhard, Amon Road. I normally make my comments at the end of the exciting, action-packed information that we get during the meeting, but and I wish Ben was here, Eldridge, because of today's Trails and Multi-Use Infrastructure chapter that's going to be gone over. While it is admirable that trails and bike paths and all these things are being considered, and I think they're wonderful, and this vision is nice, it should not include a map in which any lines are drawn on any property in which those particular property owners have not been notified. It then becomes a plan, because 2 years from now you look at it and it's like, oh, this was a plan. And so in that respect, I think it's extremely important that all of this happens, but putting lines on private property is just another example of trying to shove things down throats of people who own property and no longer doing a vision. And just like last week or 2 weeks ago, that this trail apparently was going to go right behind your bedroom, Mr. Durden. So you wouldn't want that. I don't want it on my property. I know my neighbors don't want any kind of lines drawn on their property. So, and then in addition, when it's talking to adding things to this this report as well, Dr. Venny's video or that information was done by an expert. I mean, this man is an expert. And so to exclude anything that is coming from an expert that dramatically affects any kind of situation would be irresponsible. And so even if it is long, but if a transcription is presented and available, I think it would be irresponsible not to include it in the final report, because, I mean, if somebody else thinks that they're an expert more than Dr. Venny on that particular subject, I'd love to find out who that is. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Gerhardt. Lance Kyle, you had your hand up?
Yes, sir. Bitsy's asking for the Zoom contact information. She says she's still in the hospital.
Oh,
I didn't know for HOSP period.
is it on the, can she get to the website?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kyle, go ahead.
Lance Kyle, 226 Cascade Caverns Road. I also want to support the addition of the transcript, Dr. Venny's transcript. I believe the condensed version is less than 20 pages. I did send a copy of the YouTube users agreement to a few of the committee members. I can't remember which ones. And you will see that excerpt to the YouTube users agreement says they can delete videos at any time. It happened to the manager of my business. He had a bunch of stuff from 5 years ago when he was in college, and they just deleted it out of the blue. They said didn't meet our content guidelines, didn't meet our copyright guidelines. So we really can't lose that. We can't lose that being added to the policy document, final policy document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. Anyone else? Okay, if not, we will proceed on.
Mr. Durden, I have a comment or question. I'm wondering if we could squeeze in a period when Ben is back here to maybe have some discussion about Ms. Gerhardt's comment about the
Sure.
lines on the map.
Okay. I'm going to look to you, remind me if I get
Okay.
caught up.
Or you don't have to remind him, I have a whole series on exactly what she's talking about.
Is that already going to happen? Consider adoption of trails. So, yeah, we'll get into it then. Okay.
As I was preparing, on item 4 now, as I was preparing to discuss the short and long-range plan and how we sort through the projects and, which ones we're going to include, not going to include, and how we're going to include them and how we're going to make that, there were a couple of things that came to my attention. And I'm going to call the committee members' attention to something that says Chapter 5 right here. And in the back of that report, or that group of documents, there is, the back 4 sheets is a collection of the projects that we have considered. These are the ones that have been passed forward. And so the second to the last sheet, on the front of that sheet at the bottom, there's something that says, titled Projects That May Warrant Reconsideration. And as I was assembling this, the reason I've added those is because it occurs to me that there are, excuse me, that's not that one. It's the second, it's the last sheet. No, sorry, it's not.
Second to last sheet?
No,
It's the, third to last.
yeah, it is where I was telling them. There are 2 of them that don't have project numbers. And I think that one of the projects is titled SH46 in HERF, and we've had a lot of talk about that. We've had Mr. Sharma prepared a synchro model that we could look at how we could run a little more traffic through there. That included some minor adjustments. John Kite has given us the Kite roundabout there and another option to get up closer to the Longhorn Cafe gas pumps. Others, Ms. Gerhardt, I think, has given us the Gerhardt overpass that starts over there and goes above all of that. But we don't really have a project moving forward for that intersection. And it seems to me that we undermine our credibility if that's the worst intersection, most congested intersection in town, and our report is silent on it. So I thought that we should discuss that somewhat. The other section that we don't have a project for is Coffrin Road. And I know the city of Bernie is actually, the county is actually moving forward right now, developing a schematic so that we can have a reasonably good cost estimate so that we can move forward on that once all of those things begin to fall in place out there. And for us to be silent on that when we know it's already being used a lot by cut-through traffic from upper Balcones over to 46 and vice versa, again, I think is an oversight on our part. So I just wanted to see whether y'all agree with that and that we need to maybe step back and find a way to address those 2. I think Coffrin Road is a simple thing to address. We just need to say, yes, we need to include it in here. What we do about 46 and HERF is a whole nother discussion. So,
Mr. Chair, I remember approving, or maybe we didn't have a vote on it, but I remember we approved a 2-phased approach for 46 and HERF. The first phase being a right turn lane, attempting as best possible put in a right turn lane on Herf, northbound Herf to eastbound 46. That was the first phase. The second phase, I thought was the bigger approach to elevate it and build a roundabout or a bigger improvement. I think it was a roundabout, but maybe that's where we got hung up.
I don't think we had any exact information, though, is what Don's saying. So we had, the first one was a simpler solution, low-hanging fruit type solution. How do we modify what we got now? And then the second one was the elevation of the project, but there was no like, this is the solution. That's what you're saying, right?
No, and we didn't really say what we're going to do.
Right.
I mean, I think we've recognized
There
that
were a bunch of ideas.
it's very difficult, if not impossible, to elevate that intersection out of the floodplain without a detour.
Right, so I think part of what, when you started talking about that, I was recalling the Kimley Horn presentation, where I think that was their plan they presented, right? Wasn't that the two-phase? Where there wasn't a roundabout, but phase one was to add a little slip lane or some little kind of constant turning right lane from Herf onto
46.
eastbound 46, right? And so I think, they had that a fairly easy, low-cost, immediate project, and a longer-term one that was more similar to the one that Steve Sharma and several of us worked together to create. And I think, except for designed by traffic professionals. I mean, not that Steve isn't a traffic professional, but yeah.
But we don't have to design it in this committee. We just, I think the second phase was to prioritize making it work, making a traffic engineer make it work.
Yeah, and I do think it's the important thing that we can agree on is there are solutions that we identified that could greatly improve that intersection without the necessity of raising it a huge amount. I mean, I think there was also some options about some other alternative backup routes that we could look at. In fact, I believe Kimley Horn even suggested a whole model where there was, one-way traffic, or, you remember the one that, I can't remember exactly, but they had like turning in different places and stuff. But,
And another one that was, just raise enough to get traffic going northbound, and that's it. I mean, we can't figure that out here, but the first phase was get that right turn in first. Second is prioritize something and maybe piecemeal, get 46 folks going north or River Road folks going north so that they're not stuck there in the intersection. But we're not going to decide that here. We just need to say prioritize it. Is it a short term or is it a long term?
right.
Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
Well, one of the comments that, in fact, I gave you a little layout where you move 46 up against the Longhorn, basically their service station. But anyhow, you raise it up where it's pretty much out of the floodplain. And one of the things that I did there was take the existing bridge on the east side and make it a one-way to north to east. And you have two lanes. Well, you only have one lane coming across from the west going east, which leaves you one lane free. So you've got a free entrance ramp. There's nothing to keep you from just a free right turn lane. And so that could be done there, and really not fool with raising everything up out of the floodplain. And of course, again, that's why I'm suggesting that we do something with Fry Street going across to 46. And I've been thinking more the other day. I was looking and I said, we've got IH10, we've got School Street, we've got Main Street, we've got Herf. The whole town of Bernie is stuck on 4 bridges. And if you had another one in there that's a high water bridge, you just got more diversity where you can diversify the traffic and it would meet your flooding problems. In other words, if Herf Road's actually flooded, you could use Fry Street. And if you raise 46 up against Longhorn, so these are things we could do. We don't necessarily design them right here, but it'll work. And you realign the intersection of Herf and Esser Road to where you've got two lanes going through to the south. So it would work a whole lot better. But, and that's one of the ways you could improve the traffic there by having a free right turn lane. It's always open.
I'd like
It's
to,
more or less what Jonah and them come up with, but this is just a different way of doing it.
in thinking about this, I'd like to offer something for y'all's consideration. And this, we have not discussed exactly this approach, but we've discussed elements of it. And one thing we could do, and would come as a package, where Highway 46, it goes by the fairgrounds going west, okay? Let's just say that from that point, we realign 46 to go across what creek is that comes through there? Curry Creek. And it comes through on the north side of Longhorn Cafe, and it bends around to the left and lines up with Esser/Herf. And it's already elevated a little bit, but as we approach the creek, then we elevate it a little bit more and get it out of the floodplain. And we hit where existing Herf Road bridges are now, and it's elevated there out of the floodplain with probably, maybe 10 feet of clearance underneath it, under the bridge, and then it comes back to Herf Road somewhere before you get to, is that Oak Park that runs back?
Yeah,
And-
yeah, you don't need to go near that far, but
Right,
yeah.
but I think the grades would work, and that what we would do then is propose that the city of Bernie negotiate a trade with TxDOT, where TxDOT would get the Herf Road right-of-way in return for the River Road right-of-way. And so Highway 46 would follow that route and take Herf Road down to Main Street. And the grading of that old intersection there would be such that the hike and bike trail then could go underneath and connect to the Cibolo Creek City Park pedestrian facilities and kind of unify that and make it safe and pleasant. And then whatever parking, which I believe the Longhorn Cafe parking lot is actually on city property.
Yeah.
We could move that parking to the south side. But I think that could work. What do you think, John?
You got a big if trying to convince TxDOT to take over Herf Road.
Well, I mean, and that's just it seems to me that that's not essential, but it would be desirable. I mean, they are never going to expand River Road.
Yeah, we expanded in '83.
Okay, but there is no more expansion. And
No more.
that technically is a park road, and it ought to be a park road. And we ought to lower the speed limit to 15 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But if we could convince them of that, and the facility of taking over Herf Road, I think it's probably compliant with their geometric design.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Hydraulically, it works, and I think it provides them a lot better part of the system.
It also relieves pressure on Main Street and that part that we've been talking about, which is another thing that we've discussed.
I mean, I'd very much like to see it. You did a wonderful job describing it, but I'm doing a not wonderful job reconstructing it. In my mind, it'd be really nice to kind of see a little mock-up of your concept.
Sure.
I think as I followed it, it sounded like it has merit to be considered for sure. But
What do you think, Sharma?
I think you could actually rebuild that interchange or intersection with new alignment, using the existing bridges as the detours while you build a new bridge alongside of it. Up, elevate it.
Well, I didn't get into the construction phasing because
Well, I mean, this is what. When-
Well, I wanted to see whether there was any interest in
But
moving
I
that
mean,
forward.
we could sit down and look, but you could raise that whole area up, leaving what's there now as your detours. And the new bridges would be alongside of there, but lined up with Esser Road. And then once they're done, tear the other ones out. But that's sort of what we did on the downtown Y, build it under traffic.
You were,
So, you almost have to do something like that though, because west on 46, you're never gonna get more than one lane. So, it makes a lot of sense to me.
So I believe I have a concept, I have 12 or 14 something different concepts that people have given me to how to fix that intersection. There's one that's somewhat similar to that, but I would comment that something in common that all 12, 14 different concepts for fixing this intersection, every one of them need right-of-way, whether it's the northwest corner and the southeast corner, where it's the northeast corner, the southeast corner, and the southwest, or this one has even more right-of-way. That any of the solutions we have to fix that corner require right-of-way. And I know it was before my time at the city, but talking to TxDOT and the county, they tried getting right-of-way from those landowners when they did the current project now, and those landowners were adamant that they weren't giving any more right-of-way. So that's something we'll have to figure out.
Specifically with the right-of-way issue, at the intersection of Earth and 46, or where you talk about?
Yes.
I mean, I'd want to sit down with some of y'all and get a full size, like a 1:40 or something, and lay it out and see how it works. You've already got right of way on the west side of Esser and Herf Road. Not a lot, but you have enough to do what I'm talking about.
do you say you have some concepts?
Some are sketches, some are actual lines on a map, but yeah, I can try to dig all those up. For the last couple of years, I've had several people volunteer things to me.
Okay. But I don't want to sort through a dozen. Can you pick maybe the
I
top?
can find one that's very similar to what you
Okay.
said, yeah.
And bring it to where we can all have a better visual understanding of what
Sure.
we're talking about.
I mean, would it make sense to have a short, not to put you on the hook, but a short presentation of like, and maybe not even up there, but just some images that you
Right.
show of the
Yeah.
top 3 or 4 options, and we can kind of say,
And that's one
No, sure.
next
Sure.
meeting.
No, sure, can do that.
All right, well, with y'all's permission, I will go ahead and work with Northern and get Coffin Road added in. That wasn't one of the interim committee suggestions. It's just a matter of making a project sheet and assigning a number. And then we'll let Jeff Carroll come back with the 46 and Herf intersection.
Concepts.
I don't see why the city and county don't go to TxDOT and tell them they're the ones that screwed up everything. They ought to help pay for it.
Agreed. John, would you like to lead the delegation?
That's advocacy.
That particular segment, 46 and Earth, is it realistic to think that they would show up for both the short-term projects as well as long-term projects?
I think it is realistic because there's some immediate improvements that can be made and some long-range improvements, yeah. Okay, well, I appreciate y'all's indulgence as we go forward to those, deal with those.
Commissioner, 172, did you get, you got my material on 172? I was tasked with.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, I
got
did. I think you got it, right?
Yes.
Okay. The next item, item 5, I met with Ms. Hodges and Ben Eldridge last week to go over the trails and multi-use chapter / appendices, and we had a good meeting. I think that there were some changes, some minor changes made. I don't know. Ms. Hodges, since Ben's not here, did y'all get any other comments?
Yes, we added an introduction, an additional introduction as to what the, a little bit more of an explanation of the vision and how it works with traffic and congestion, and then also added some alternative transportation.
Okay.
So So you shouldn't have that. I think Ms. sent that to you this morning.
He did. I got it late this morning. I had something else, but I'd like to defer that until the next meeting as well. They have put an incredible amount of effort into this chapter, and I think we need to give it serious consideration rather than rush it through. So I think it's ready, and we will distribute that to you by email and hopefully take action on it. Please don't submit additional comments unless they're really important, because we got to,
Fatal flaws on me.
yeah.
Okay. And would this be the spot to discuss the lines on map comment that Ms. Gerhart brought up?
We can. I think that's a good point. I will tell you that part of, I'm going to read you the language that I came up with regard to major thoroughfare plans. Many of the projects that have been recommended or suggested by the public are projects that show up on the city's major thoroughfare plan. And in fact, there's a whole sheet of them. I've grouped them in the spreadsheets. And so I thought it's important that we, y'all may recall that I had volunteered to write something about major thoroughfare plan protocol. I think it's addressed in part by the policy committee language that has been adopted. And so I thought I'd reinforce that by this, and I'm just going to read it so the audience can hear it as well. Major thoroughfare plan projects. Major thoroughfare plan projects identified new roads that, if constructed, will improve the transportation grid and likely mitigate construction. Some of these projects, projects 27 and 38, are within ongoing developments and therefore are likely to be completed in the next few years by the developers of these tracts. However, some of these projects, for example, projects 12, 26, and 166, run across land that is not currently slated for development. And therefore, when or even if these projects would be completed is not known. The committee worked hard to develop a policy that balances the need for prudent transportation system planning, a future major thoroughfare system, with the need to acknowledge the discomfort of landowners across whose tracks these major thoroughfare lines run. Several landowners testified that their properties were not as marketable with major thoroughfare lines crossing them as they might otherwise be. In general, these are owners of large residential estate tracts of 20 acres or less that exist among other similar-sized tracts or near other similar-sized tracts. The committee suggests entities that adopt major thoroughfare plans avoid drawing lines across areas that are already developed as either standard or residential estate lots, or across larger properties that are unlikely to be developed, such as conservation easements and tracts with special environmental issues. Also, major thoroughfare plans should attempt to avoid greenfield roads that cross developed areas, whether those areas are developed as small residential lots or large residential estate lots. For the major thoroughfare plan to contribute meaningfully to a community's major thoroughfare system, the plan must embrace properties that have a reasonable likelihood of being developed. Now, admittedly, history has shown that some landowners will vigorously assert that they never will sell their property, but a few years later, their heirs, and in some cases the present owners, will sell. Therefore, it's reasonable to plan for future thoroughfares across property where future development is plausible, whether planned or not. Still, the committee strongly believes that rights of way for major thoroughfares should be acquired almost always through the development process, not through the eminent domain process. Nevertheless, the committee is unwilling to recommend eminent domain never be used. The committee's position is clear that it should be used only as a last resort to close minor gaps in the system, such as projects 18 and 19. And those are on the southwest quadrant. See Chapter 7 from policy recommendations regarding these planning greenfield roads. So I don't know if that addresses the concern. I mean, it lays it out.
I think you did a wonderful job of laying out the concern, especially as it relates to new greenfield roads and the thoroughfare planning process. My understanding was her concern was specifically about the trails that were drawn on the map in the trails program, or whatever you call that,
Right.
plan or vision, and whether or not that could create some real unease amongst some of those landowners of who those lines are drawn across. And so I don't know if there is a way to, instead of a line, make a big swath, or instead say here's a concept of an idea of a trail that more or less follows the Guadalupe River or some way, but without actually. I mean, ultimately, it's going to require a group of people contacting landowners, looking at funding options, and doing a lot of things. And again, the whole plan was voluntary, but it's going to require significant exploration before those lines are anything close to reality. So is it doing more of a disservice to people to put them on there because of the misinterpretation or not? I mean, I'm waiting to be convinced one way or the other on this issue, but I think that she brings up a valid point. It's been in the philosophy of this group since the beginning that we're very cautious about throwing lines on maps, and that plan has a lot of big lines on maps across big parts of the county, and so they're qualified, but this is something worth.
Yeah, and I believe that her remark was focused on trails, but I guess what I'm saying is if we apply the same rationale to trails, is that in the committee's, is that the best we can do, or do we need to somehow go beyond that? I don't see where we go beyond that.
One of the comments, Ben and I met and talked about this, and basically this is what I wrote back to Ben. TxDOT's got a good design manual on trails and all that, so, but a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with us. But what I was mentioning is, how do we define trails and multi-use infrastructure? To me, it needs to be separated into two clear paths. The one that relates to congestion relief could be titled Pedestrian Mobility Corridor, which directly impacts traffic patterns around schools, since the use of corridors such as this could get more students to walk or ride their bicycles, and not having parents or school buses deliver the students to the school, thereby reducing traffic congestion. These corridors could be all over town to open up connectivities for easy pedestrian accessibility to desired locations. And we've talked about this over and over. Okay, the trails definition could be left as it is, as a more long-term idealistic undertaking. One comment, don't fall into the same trap as TxDOT did with the Gateway project. Lines everywhere, so many lines running across areas that you knew wouldn't work, that the public just roll their eyes and dismiss the whole project as having no validity. Some of your examples are too busy with too many lines that realistic won't ever come to be. In the rural areas, with the sensitivity to drawing lines across private properties, it might be better to just verbally describe a desired beginning and ending point for future trail. Would the proposed trail be a prepared trail or just an informal pathway? I doubt that private property owners would be comfortable with the public having a free 24/7 access to their property. I see a lot of the proposed trail alignments as being more pie-in-the-sky wish list, with the realization that few, if any, may come to fruition. I look at trails as being recreational in nature and not something that one would use to go to work or to make deliveries on. There are several opportunities in Bernie to create nice trail system along several of the drainage channels, if only the city owned the right-of-way or at least held an easement to the property. A walking trail along Curry Creek north of Blanco already exists. One needs to consider the cost of a proposed project and the potential number of users to justify its consideration and maintenance costs. Where are they coming from? My guesstimate, and I think there's one of them, a hike and bike trail from Bernie to Comfort along either IH-10 or FM 289 would exceed $5 million for pavement, bridges, and utility adjustments. For that cost, how many people would use it annually, and where would the funds come from? I think doing a long range plan.
I texted Dr. Whiteville about kind of what our barriers are before we leave, and he just wants to check your last labs. Do you know how long ago they came to?
Bitsy needs to mute.
I think a long-range plan for non-automotive mobility is a good thing, but one must keep their feet on the ground and not get carried away with an unrealistic wish list of projects, both in scope and cost. The public can see through these type grandiose projects or proposals and dismiss the whole idea of mine. What you've done so far is good, but needs to be fine-tuned to bring it down to reality, to projects that could reasonably be accepted and accomplished. We can together go over this in your plans. But anyhow, we don't want to get caught in the same trap, too many lines across properties. I noticed that one of them went across my old property. Well, and I don't live there anymore, but I wasn't interested in people going across it when I lived there. And it was beautiful. It was on the top of the hill, and the bicyclists went on Tower Road all the time. But the idea that you wanted to deal across my property, I don't think so.
Ben, to bring you up to speed, we're having a discussion. Ms. Gerhardt, in opening remarks, mentioned that the exhortations we heard many times in the past about drawing lines on maps for major thoroughfares should apply equally to trails, and that before we draw lines across properties. And so Jonah asked that we have a little bit of opportunity to discuss that. We're not going to try to deliberate the trails report today because they really haven't had a chance to do it, but we are discussing how we address this concept of trails across greenfield property.
This is where I found myself constrained as I was using Google Earth in terms of if you were to put a swath, to your point, which is how the Great Springs Project also shows their alignments. If you try to put a swath in there and you try to make it so it's transparent, you still couldn't get very wide. So it looks like a line. And so that's where I probably should have pivoted over to Photoshop and done the swath approach, because it's not, it's as I said to you guys repeatedly, those were not intended to be lines. They do intend to show connections. In some cases we played with hypotheticals, but honestly they were not intended to be that way. It is grand. It is a big vision. I know you call it pie in the sky. I get it. That was on purpose. And it's so that we start to think about what could the future of trails be in a place like this. There's a tendency for people to approach trails as mere recreation when we believe, and the committee believed, have the potential to actually serve a true mobility role. And you say, I don't see people going to work on this stuff. Maybe not in current Kendall County, but as you start to see cities expand and grow, regions grow, and populations increase, those trails start to become part of mobility for a lot of people.
Well, that's why I suggested you pull these things apart and have a pedestrian mobility corridor. That's what we talked about. That would work great to help congestion.
Well, yeah, no, so I hear that. The point was to show a vision and to make it a bold vision, not piddly, if you will. Not confined to, and I'm not saying it's, there's two pieces of it. Show a vision, but also talk about the role that either thoroughfare planning could play in creating that vision. We tend to look at thoroughfare plans as just major roadways, arterials. Oh, and we'll tack a sidewalk onto that. Yeah, you guys want to use sidewalks, there's your sidewalk over there. And I was saying no, or we're saying no.
we would like to see these be actual greenways that people can go and enjoy, but also can be safely buffered and frankly in their own space away from cars.
So
And I don't know that that's illegitimate, just because that's not maybe traditional engineering parlance.
Just don't get carried away in the chicken and never pot.
But before we do that, my co-chair, Bob, has his hand up. So I don't know if you can unmute yourself, Bob, but you have the floor.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, I just wanted to sort of echo a lot of what Ben just said. At his presentation 2 weeks ago, he begged us not to overinterpret what appeared to be lines on a map, but at the same time, during the presentation, his verbal entreaties to us to not take those serious does conflict with Ms. Gerhardt's concern that they still do appear to be lines. So I really prefer, in the spirit of how our committee's operated for these years, that we more talk about connecting point A to point B, a lot of what John Kite was saying earlier, and get lines, any notion of a line off the map, and just talk aspirationally about what you want to connect, and let other entities deal with specific routing and connections and contact with landowners and whatnot. I think it is volatile. I think Ms. Gerhardt phrased it very well. It's the same reaction as we had at Gateway when there was a bunch of lines drawn all over the place. So let's just avoid that controversy. I think it's divisive for no good reason. So I know, Ben, you intended that 2 weeks ago. I just think that the graphics supporting your suggestions need to be reflective of it not confusing people at all. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, thank you. So I agree. I do think that there might be a Photoshop alternative where you draw a big arc with an arrow pointing to A and B, but they're all the arcs are drawn the same, and it's clear that the exact spot isn't, but I do think it would prevent some of this unnecessary distraction from the benefits of the plan to avoid the perception of exact lines. I just think that would help a lot for the visioning of it. I also think that the suggestion that John Kite made, I feel like that was a suggestion that I made as well. Like, I think I also like the idea of considering there is like the in-town connecting roads to schools and like like linking little bike trails that is fundamentally different than this grand vision of a trail network throughout the town. And I don't think it detracts from either, but it does provide a place for people to look when they're looking for certain elements, right? If you're looking for the in-town solutions, there they are. If you're looking for the big trails vision for the county, there they are. So I think I kind of agree with that. Now, if the plan's at a place now or we're not making edits, then here it is. But those are just my thoughts.
May I, before, Ben, and this is more for the folks in the committee as well, but in the committee we did discuss, and I haven't been engaged, I know, for the last 2 weeks. I've been helping Commissioner with some other things, but haven't been part of this work group, so you may have already discussed it. But at one time we talked about having a short-term list of trail projects and a long-term list of projects. I've always proposed and suggested, highly suggested, that it look mirror image of what the rest of the document is looking like. So I thought we were going to put those short and long-term projects on the same type crowd source sheet. And if we do that, most of the ones that are conflicting are long-term. I think there's a way to narrate the purpose of that system, that trail, that network through Kendall County, or from Comfort to Bernie, from Bernie to Bexar County's trail system, City of San Antonio's trail system. I'd be happy to assist in molding that language in a short-term list and a long-term list.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, Jonah, to your point, I think a wide swath approach definitely makes sense. I mean, without a doubt. And it was not my intention to suggest, oh, these are firm lines at all on a map. This is not Kindle Gateway stuff,
Turns out lines are
Well,
sensitive
I know.
topic in this community.
They are sensitive topics, and in fact, we do have, in some areas, we definitely have some lines in our recommendations. They're just not large, lines. They're connectors. So again, my intention has always been, and I think the group's intention was to make sure that we elevated the conversation about pedestrian and micromobility safety so that we're not treating it as honestly, as an afterthought, the way it seems like it is treated as, oh, we'll just tack it onto the road. It's really about the road. A sidewalk is a side to a road. We're talking about maybe taking the side out of it, and it's a walk. It's a right-of-way. It's a pathway. It's a quality of life enhancer, and it's also a potential mobility corridor. And again, there is a definite bias, without a doubt, toward the road is for cars, and it's all about the cars, and cars, cars, cars. And meanwhile, people like Mr. Kuhn come to me and say, man, I've lost a lot of friends on the roads because they've been driven off the roads, literally died. And it's because the priority in the design is all around cars, really. And people's bias when they're in the cars, it's about them. It's not about share the road. So we're trying to get away from that. We're trying to think more evolutionary about how we engage in transportation planning and not just repeat 20th century rote approaches that are literally only represent, like 80 years of humanity.
Well, there's certain areas in the county that are beautiful to walk on.
Mm-hmm.
But rather than putting a line there, just say, in this area, it's a beautiful views to walk on. Just, just like the road I used to live on. It was beautiful to walk on, but it's only 16 feet wide, and you're going to get run over. So
My sense is that we've resolved this conversation. Like, I do feel like you've agreed that the concerns, and Ms. Gerhart, hopefully her concerns get addressed.
And to your point, it's not locked in stone. It's subject for iteration, for sure. Yeah.
But if the lines don't, if something is not put on a map, whether a wide brushstroke or a point A to point B idea, it will not happen, ever.
Well,
If that idea isn't out there.
There are some ways, and I think part of the recommendation has to do with incorporating trail planning together with major thoroughfare planning, so that that the major thoroughfares include designated separate use paths.
That's correct.
And I think there are other cases where we have large developments, and I'll just lay out a couple of them as examples. George's Ranch is a large development where the developer he has the opportunity still to incorporate internal hike and bike paths within his development. I don't think the city or the county has the regulatory authority to require that, but that could be one of our recommendations, and it could be a legitimate ask. And if they're paying attention, I think that they'll look around the country and see that many large developments actually incorporate those amenities into their neighborhoods.
That's right.
And it's to their benefit, particularly for an older generation that wants to drive golf carts and, micro-mobility. So they may be open to the idea. Another opportunity is to come down from Miralomas down through Lake Oz and some designated floodplain areas down into the city of Bernie.
I know that owner. You're not going to do it.
Well, it's an opportunity. Yep. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But, Miralomas is a large development with a lot of open area and dense clusters. So, again, it's conducive to that sort of.
And I think verbally, that's what we are to say it in the long-term planning.
So I think, paradigm changes come about not because somebody necessarily had a big plan that was drawn out, but because a concept was developed someplace that inspired other people to say, hey, we could do that over here. And pretty soon it becomes the way you do things. And I think that is probably the fastest way to affect that paradigm shift in Kendall County. But I'm going to leave that up to the subcommittee on trails and multi-function. Y'all have heard the comments, and hopefully that will be reflected in your report next meeting.
I have one more addition. I do recall at the end of that meeting how it became clear that what they were recommending was that the county develop a thoroughfare plan to encourage developments to have connectivity in their trail networks. There might be ways of encouraging that without pre-drawing lines, where you just say, we encourage developers to build a trail network that provides the opportunity to connect to neighboring systems. Or we might recommend that the county develop a trail thoroughfare plan. And maybe this is just like the starting concept, but it really would be up to the county to draw the trail thoroughfare plan lines on the map if that was to happen, not.
And that's literally the prescription. And let me just ask a question for clarity. And but isn't the committee this committee recommending that the county engage in thoroughfare planning?
Mm-hmm.
Are we assuming that they're not going to draw lines on any maps for thoroughfare planning, or is it all policy based?
No, I think that they're intending to draw lines on maps. We're giving them guidelines how to draw those, that they give preference to existing corridors, that they limit, that they avoid environmentally sensitive and already developed areas, that they try to go across tracks that they believe are legitimately going to be developed and will become part of the those are the kind of things. Give them some guidance.
I would say all those same criteria should apply to a
Right.
trails right of way. But the difference is that, again, there's that strong bias. It's historical bias. And yes, I am aiming for a paradigm shift, obviously, towards saying, oh, it's only about roads. It's all, everybody else can just, glum on. It's all about roads. And I think it's short-sighted, and I honestly think we lose quality of life outcomes if we don't embrace other approaches to thoroughfare planning that are more holistic.
I don't think
account
that
for more.
the issue is the lines.
Well, then, I get.
We want trails. Trails would be awesome.
I get it, but my point is that if you apply the exact same criteria to trail lines, what would be wrong with including them?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why we read the thoroughfare thing before we discussed this. So I think the points and connecting the dots also gives you the opportunity for some property owner out there to say, oh, man, that's cool. I want to do that on my property without a line. Like say, it looks like I could connect you to James Keel Park somehow. That's what I'm saying. Like it gives an opportunity for that to happen. But we're doing the same thing. So the bottom line is all of the trails would be awesome and amazing. And I love pie in the sky. I think it's great. But we don't need to draw lines on a map.
Fair enough. Okay.
That's a property rights thing is what we're talking about. And that's why we're bringing it up with transportation and with pedestrian traffic too.
So for the sake of another point of clarity to that point, and also to your point that we've been hearing everybody, am I hearing that you guys would say simply remove all lines or are swaths like Jonah was saying? See.
I think you could do start and end point with a big arrow, that kind of points them out, but without the little detailed, curly Q lines. Yeah, just kind of an arching saying, hey, here's our concept.
Have you used Canva before?
Say again?
Have you used Canva before? It's
Well, I
very
think in
easy.
the very beginning, we talked about having mobility for people, low income and all that. That's part of it. It's still part
It's
of it.
definitely part of it.
I think the thing that gives the map this sort of overwhelming sense of trails everywhere is that you're identifying trails that go along existing roadways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you can cover those trails with narrative. Just say where we have existing roadways, we should consider trying to create separate use paths, either within the right of way or adjacent to the right of way.
Or on a separate map.
Yeah.
Going back to that.
Trails on roadways map, and then other ideas for you're right. You look at the map, and you're like, spaghetti.
Well, so I'm looking for real clarity. Fair enough. Okay, so I'm looking for real clarity though on swaths.
You're on the wrong committee.
I'm looking for clarity on swaths anyway. Because you guys are trying to give me clarity and instructions to go back to work with you guys. And so I'm trying to figure out how do I do that? And is our swaths out?
I would
And
just-
we could welcome comments from the public. if they-
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment before we open it up on, is that, I really like, Don, the language that you use, because it captured a lot of the conversations that we've had on trade-offs and how we move forward. And the fact that we heard the concerns, and this is how we adapted policy to meet those concerns. On the trails, one of the things I couldn't agree more, Ben, that your vision has always been adopted or accepted by us. I shouldn't say always, but it's a process. I like the idea of having a vision, but I also know that in all of our conversations about mobility, we've been also cognizant that there are constraints. And therefore, we have a short-term and a long-term list.
Right.
So in your deliberations, I'm pretty sure it's in there, that you have some areas within the city limits at a higher priority than others, to complete, connect, fill in gaps, that kind of thing. So if that is reflected in the plan so that when we submit this and when the community looks at it, they have a sense of what's going to happen in some reasonable period of time. It's okay to show them the vision, but it's more important to show them what's going to happen in the near term. And I just highlight that we did it on the roadways, or that's what we're working towards. We ought to do the same thing on the trails. That's my only comment.
I think that's cool. Northern, did you have something you were going to?
I was just saying, I think I got it on your computers. That is
It disappeared. It was here for a second and then went away.
Of course it is. That is, let's see, right? There, behind you. That's Canva. That's one draft I have for one of our projects, and it disappeared.
There it is.
There.
Quick,
Hurry, see it.
Everybody look at it really quickly.
Something like that.
No, I agree. I think that's a great idea, but again, once again, we're doing that is my point. That was really my point, and I'm asking, that's okay? To play along those non-lines?
Another technique I've used, and I don't know
That
that,
arrow there takes up about 10 acres of my property.
This arrow goes along with the narrative that a connection should be made somewhere between point A and point B.
I know, but instead of being an arch, like point A to point B, it well, you might as well get out your checkbook. Because all that's doing is it's just establishing what the city has been basically shoving down our throats since 2013. Before that, but technically since 2013.
So in other words, the wider the better, right?
no, it's none at all.
Or
I
none
think
at all.
if you would take,
I thought you were talking to John like an arc, like here's a point.
Like flying over it.
Yeah, that's what it was.
yeah, I think if you make one, just
Because,
maybe loop.
okay, hold on. I'm having to use free software. So at some point, software becomes
Well, Ben has
That's what
access to
I ran into.
Photoshop. We can draw arcs in Photoshop. but that's-
Another way to handle this sometimes is to just identify the resources that you want to connect. Say, here's a resource, here's a location, and without drawing the line, just say, we'd like to connect these things.
Yeah, just a
But
big,
Why don't
that's y'all's.
I can experiment with an arc line, all that jazz, and we see if people like it or not, and if they feel comfortable with it or not.
I do think if we're going to vote on this next meeting, it's 2 weeks from now, right? Okay. Then you'd have to have a draft that you could send if you want to get input from people, just of the map.
Right.
So that we can have a final version to review. Give us a week to review the final version.
There you go.
And give me feedback. No, I really appreciate all these comments, and I do think they're absolutely legitimate and are worthy of addressing. So I really do agree. Yes,
Okay.
we have a gentleman who wants to talk.
Again, I appreciate, like I said last time, your effort and everything. But I'd like to see, and I hear talk about, our kids are going to use these to get to school and all that kind of stuff. Well, where I live in the poor district of Bergheim, but there's a lot of rich people, and I don't believe their kids will use this stuff. but I want you to prove the concept, okay? We have Voss Middle School, okay? And we have Kendall Woods right next to it. I don't know if the Voss property touches Kendall Woods in any form or fashion, but let's put a trail out there, okay, to connect that subdivision with Voss, and see what happens there. And I know that, my wife, thanks to Mr. Pacina, okay, has been going to Voss Middle School and walking the dogs and all that kind of stuff. So again, she'd have to trespass over a couple of properties to get there. But again, maybe we can get some of the people out of Kendall Woods to start using it and, proof of concept. I see a lot of people on Old Number 9 all the time. Maybe if you put that trail in there, okay, maybe you'll prove up the concept, okay? There's a lot of people, X number of people, using this trail, all that kind of stuff. So again, Mr. Cena knows a lot about where the property boundaries are and everything, and I'd like to see you do something like that.
Yeah, so I agree with that. And just for a clarifying point, this was intended to be a vision, not necessarily, right? So it will never happen if it can't prove it's working along the way. I think that's a given. And going back to the list, if you will, one of the things we prioritize is safe routes to schools. And one of the things that we also noticed with trail development is that they don't tend to connect places. And that's what you're pointing out. And that if they've connected places, they might have the utility that we're discussing and solve some constraints of, caused by congestion. So we're trying to push basically that full spectrum, but at the same time, if these don't work, even if if a couple lines are thrown on thoroughfare planning maps at some point, they'll get pulled eventually because, hey, that just doesn't work.
Okay.
And that's,
well, and again, Barcroft is right there. Maybe you can connect into that, and get all that incorporated there. Because again, I'd like to know that it's going to work.
Yeah.
Good point.
Fair enough.
Let me ask you a question on this whole concept, because I attended a couple of those meetings in that committee. The whole concept of a vision. Let me share this. I was in a meeting this morning where there was a photo in 1901 of the Easter Parade in Washington, D.C. There was one car. 13 years later, at the same Easter Parade in Washington, D.C., there was only one horse. So who knows where the world is going to go? But isn't the point behind a trail system when we really don't have a specific idea of right-of-ways? Wouldn't it be more prudent to say, here's a concept of an idea that we encourage the county and the city to investigate to connect points of interest or community points of interest with the right-of-way determined by willing sellers and willing buyers? Wouldn't that be a more sensible approach? Because why foment opposition when it's just an idea? It's not really a specific plan. It's an idea. It's a vision. It's a good vision, but why generate that kind of opposition? Because I'll bet you if you got 5 people or 10 people in a room and say, hey, what do you think of this idea? People would say, well, it's a pretty good idea. But then you show them a specific line. Well, wait a moment here. That's my land. Okay. But maybe the person 2 doors down would be saying, I like the idea, and I'd be willing to sell. So, I mean, I don't.
So, yeah. So I hear you. So that's how Great Springs Project is fulfilling most of their trails plan. I mean, they've got a lot of tools in their toolkit. But what differentiates us from them in a lot of ways is that we are actually in an area that is not as developed as I-35 corridor is, and where there are massive ranches that are likely, in fact, you can even see them on the map based on who owns which parcels, are definitely slated for development. And so we sit there and go, well, maybe that's a place where we say that can also incorporate thoroughfare planning as a solution. And I don't know why we would say just roads get the thoroughfare planning designation, and I'm calling that out, really. Just because, hey, traditionally that's what we did. I just don't go for that, to be honest with you. Unless it's better, conveyed to me through logic, not just through assumption.
I do think there's, it was interesting. I went on a trip out of town recently and found that app that's called All Trails that gives you all the different routes to hike and reviews about them. And got home and was feeling sorry for myself because I'd been spending a couple of weeks in Colorado and there's trails everywhere, and got home and Turns out Cave Without a Name has about a mile or something, quarter hiking trail completely free to the public. So here's a landowner, because when we were talking about, oh yeah, so-and-so might want a trail, and I was thinking, yeah, who's going to do that? And then I just recalled that here's a landowner that is allowing the public to go onto their property and go for free hikes. So go hike on Cave Without a Name if you haven't. It's I haven't yet.
All right, I'm going to pull the plug on that discussion. I think you've had plenty of feedback, and we look forward to your committee's report, and hopefully it will be unanimously adopted at the next meeting. Just want to step back to item 2. We have the minutes of July the 5th in your packet behind the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Second. That
Any
motion.
objection to approving the minutes of July the 5th? Hearing none, they're approved. Okay, moving down to item number 6. All right, I would ask that you go again to the package titled Chapter 5, that you turn to the series of spreadsheets at the back of that package. This is my sort and my approach, suggested approach, and y'all can mutiny on it and hang the captain or make me walk the plank or whatever you'd like to do. But trying to find a way to decide what's short and long-term projects and what goes in which plan was a muddle, so I just usually dump the puzzle pieces out on the board when I'm faced with that and start sorting things out and look for patterns. And these are all the projects that we have decided by consensus to move forward. So, are you missing some, Ben?
Oh, do you not have the Chapter 5? There you go. The first sort that I got was major thoroughfare plan projects, and you can see in the third column from the left, it has MTP on those. It's titled with a green bar, major thoroughfare plan projects. What does MTP stand for?
Major thoroughfare plan.
Thank you.
These are all projects that, this is, Project 12 is the one that Adler Road extends across Jonas family's property. Regent Boulevard is one of those projects that it needs an extension, but there's no development. It's a short section, but there's no development right now, I believe, identified for that. Is that right, Jeff?
Sorry, which one?
Regent.
18 Regent Boulevard.
To Upper Balconies.
Correct, that's.
Okay. Another one, same category, I think, is Tilbury Drive. It's a short missing link piece.
Correct.
Then we've got 1376, which is the extension from Highway Main Street North across that land down to Johns Road. We have then Copper Creek, and there's actually 2 parts to that. The Copper Creek down to its southern boundary, which is under development. And then there's the section that goes across the 423-acre tract south of there to Cascade Caverns that we've said is rife with environmental concerns, and the landowners' families have testified they have no intention of making that part of a development.
Is that all part of 27?
Yeah, if you'd like us to split that, we can do that. The next one is a new road from 46 that goes over and hooks on to Spring Creek and goes over to 474. Next one is 1376 extension, which is similar to number 26. And we probably can combine those two and say that's the same project. And then we have a Greenfield Road that goes from Spencer Ranch. This is west of I-10 up to Johns Road. We have a section of Greenfield Road between Vista Verde and Hunters Creek and Champion Boulevard. And I believe that's the one that Jeff said it is on the major thoroughfare plan already, just having trouble to getting the developer to do that, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
There's another one, Greenfield Road along the transmission line from SH 46 to north of Esperanza. This is the, I guess, the eastward extension of Adler. Anyway, these are all major thoroughfare plan projects. And my understanding is that we generally support these projects if they're done in conjunction with development. And if they're not done in conjunction with development, we think they should not be done.
I do have one question about this, which is that anything that's on the thoroughfare plan will be done in the short term or in the long term, whenever the development happens. And so I did kind of wonder about that, where it belongs, since it's sort of the timing seems to be more dictated by the development.
My suggestion is that if it's within an existing development, say the Copper Creek, that would be a short-term project. Okay, if it's a thoroughfare that is within, what's the ones, Bernie back, what's it?
Corley Farms.
Corley Farms, that's a short-term project. But if it's across, if it's Adler Extension, or if it's, something else up there.
Cascade Caverns or.
Yeah, that it'd be a long-term project. It's just identified as something that could help congestion, but until it develops, it's not going to be.
But John, if these are projects already on the City of Verde major thoroughfare plan, and we endorse some projects that we appreciate being done, why would we even worry whether they're a short-term plan or a long-term plan at all? Why wouldn't we move them over and disidentify them, having our support at the appropriate time is done?
Well, because I think it's the opportunity to make the case about the benefits of the major thoroughfare plan and the downsides of using a major thoroughfare plan approach to develop your transportation infrastructure. That's my answer to the question. Maybe we just don't even mention them at all.
I think we need to associate ourselves with the Verde major thoroughfare plan and identify that, and we support it.
I mean, I think from the public standpoint, at least at the beginning of this process, it was that developers are coming in and bringing all these houses, and they're not doing anything for transportation. And they're bringing all the houses, they are doing some part for transportation, and they should.
I thought we endorsed
I think we do.
major thoroughfare plan once before.
I think it's in the policy document. Isn't there somewhere in there where we talk about supporting the city's thoroughfare planning process?
Right.
Yeah.
There are also some that we said we don't necessarily agree with a line so much as a point A to point B connection at some point.
Yeah, I think throughout this process, we've identified there's pitfalls, right? One of the pitfalls being that other people find those lines, other entities and planning entities, and they think, oh, well, this would be a great place to build the Kendall Gateway, or, there's ways of this planning process being abused and misused. But at the same time, I think developers should be accountable for providing transportation when they develop a property and build houses. And if this is the best way to do that, then.
The other benefit of including them on here as part of the major thoroughfare plan highlighted by the committee is it also I would imagine, leads credence in negotiations with these developers, that it's important, as opposed to just the policy statement alone.
I think we need to list them and say something about them, because I think many of those comments came from the public, and I don't think that they may have even known that it was on the major thoroughfare plan. But I would just put that there for your consideration. That is one logical group of buckets. If you'll turn back a couple of pages, there's another logical group of buckets, or bucket of group of projects that goes in a bucket, and these are TxDOT projects. You'll see there that they're projects.
Don, I'm sorry, you said go a couple of pages? Okay, there it is,
Yeah.
project.
These are things like installing a roundabout at 474 in Esler, 474 in Adler, Main and School in Adler. All of these projects somehow or another touch or involve TxDOT. Some of them are like SH 46 West out of Deep Hollow. That's a legitimate concern for transportation, but it's nothing that the city of Bernie or the county is going to unilaterally address. We can perhaps influence it, but these are a group of projects I think we should identify, and then we can sort through the ones that we think are really important and put the important ones as short-term projects where we can leverage what little influence we have, and others that might be longer term. Now, in that same vein, there's one subset of projects that we talked about having identified as the City of Bernie Downtown Master Plan. These were a collection of comments that were mostly focused on improving pedestrian safety and mobility along Main Street. And so I think we identified those and have a little blurb about those in the report. There's also another group of TxDOT projects, which I've called the SH 46 East Roundabout Corridor, that there would be a little blurb about, saying that we need, this is a concept, it needs to be explored.
It's a vision?
Except we're working with a line that's already on the ground, okay?
Trying to put a circle in it.
Yeah. But anyway, and then what's left, after you take out the major thoroughfare plan and the TxDOT projects, is the other projects that are in the middle there, which start, it just says other projects. Project number 2 is one of them. These are pedestrian and roadway projects. They go down through 211 on the next page. And they're everything from replacing a signal with a roundabout to extending Fry Street across the Cibolo. And we can sort through those one by one. There's a couple of them that are down there on the bottom. Attempt to purchase right away and construct. These are not on the thoroughfare plan, but they're cases where we thought, the Fry Street extension is a concept that John brought to us that we thought had merit. Maybe we want to say, look at that in more depth. Another one is 46 to Esser, kind of the alignment that I was talking about earlier today. So those are the buckets that I see, and I'm just going to lay that. Is that a reasonable approach to how we organize this?
I think it is, Commissioner. I'm going to say that when you look at the first group, the MTP, the Major Thoroughfare Plan project, those are city and potentially county projects. The TxDOT projects, obviously, are TxDOT or TxDOT responsibility. If we're going to prioritize, if we're going to say this committee needs to give TxDOT their priority, so we pick short and long term, I believe, my opinion is that we should tell the city what MTP projects are short-term and long-term priority. A short-term, for example, what if, this is just using Regency, Jeff, what if Regency becomes a priority other than the committee? There's a means of the city approaching the property owner and saying, you can have a pre-development agreement with the developer to say, donate the right of way and we'll give you a value of X on the development or the property that you sell, correct? Y'all do pre-development agreements, don't y'all, for right of way? Sometimes. So that gives them some direction to say, well, maybe we will prioritize this street and start working with the property owner. If they don't want to, they're done. They wait for development. We got to communicate that with the city, TxDOT, and of course, folks sitting out here listening to us.
The other part that crossed my mind as well is even the Hawk signal that we got TxDOT to build for us on Blanco, where they told us at first, hey, it's on our list, we're going to get to it in 4 or 5 years. And the city came back and said, hey, we'll pay 10%. And next thing you know, it got built this year.
Yeah.
So there's ways that even we can get stuff on TxDOT's list, but if the city and county work, we can get it to be on their list to match where our list is.
And Jeff's, when he says lists on TxDOT, there's different lists. They're long-term and they've got lists too. So that helps Jeff advocate through with Gina to say, let's put it on the MPO and keep moving it up, and we'll put 10% or 20% to move it up.
No, exactly.
So-
Pre-development agreement is a good concept that we do not have in here, and I think I'll add that to the narrative.
I believe one of the policy statements talks about that.
No, I think it does.
Oh, okay.
I'm suggesting that each one of these buckets have a little short narrative about saying, okay, this is many projects or TxDOT projects, some of them are good, some of them are bad. These, just sort of discuss
I get
that and then refer to more detail.
Pre-development, okay.
Other comments about the organization of the projects?
I have one quick one on it. The projects, the 16 projects on the interim committee,
On the what?
we recommended, like the committee came back in session in early 2021. The interim project, 16 projects, where are those? Can be listed separately, is it
Yeah, they're all,
identified? I know there's one identified as the interim project. What I'm not seeing, quite honestly, is 27,473.
yeah, it is there. It's called traffic calming. It's under a TxDOT project. I think it's project 84.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
So I definitely agree with the
224s. Sorry about that. There are 224s though.
Yeah, one of them is crowdsourced and one of them is,
Got it. Go ahead, Ben, I'm sorry.
That's all good. So no, I think separating out TxDOT projects makes a lot of sense for sure. I do wonder if the pedestrian pieces need to be also separated out just to differentiate them. I think about like Bitsy and Rich's, the projects committee, and how a lot of those are literally intended to solve school issues.
Yeah.
And I think we need to make sure that we're, implying a more holistic intent than just one-offs.
And the trails are going to be separated also, so sidewalk and separate.
Yeah.
Two different systems, yeah.
Must be a fire truck.
I'm sorry, Don. I guess my point being is that whether we should identify those projects, you've already really pushed forward in early 2021 with the interim project. They're out there, they make recommendations.
you're suggesting that we do what with it, Gary?
Just identify, it's,
From the interim committee or from,
yes, those 16 projects that we presented before we came back from COVID.
okay.
Could that just be in the comments there?
Some of them are identified as interim committee, but frankly, some of those are identified as crowdsourced, but we can do the interim committee. I think they're all in here, but we can add interim committee to all of them. And that'll highlight if we missed any.
I wonder about, you have the east roundabout corridor, and I wonder, I recall there being a sort of north and south concept but both of them were on the east side of Bernie. They were from 46 coming in, there was sort of the going up north towards Adler, and then there was the going south through Herb. And I'm wondering if you can explain, like clarify yeah, I'm just wondering, did we catch, is that both of those, or what is that in that category?
The Highway SH 46 East Roundabout Corridor?
Yeah.
That is strictly TxDOT projects. The project you're talking about is a project.
Oh, okay, so, sorry, I'm sorry. The SH 46 East Roundabout Corridor is all 46.
Yeah.
Okay, those are all the different, okay. that makes
There
sense.
was a roundabout corridor that Ben talked about that went up Esser and Adler.
Right.
And if we want to call that out, I think it's in here as a comment, but,
I mean, ultimately, we're just organizing these for our own mental process for us going through them and trying to select the highest priority projects.
right. And some of them, I mean, we can influence, I don't know that it's worth spending a lot of time talking about what TxDOT, getting a big argument about whether we're going to do this or that. If they're going to do what they're going to do, we can say really important or not so important.
Right.
And
I do think, though, in our final product, it makes sense to say, here's our top 5 projects
Yes.
that are TxDOT related,
right.
and here's our top 5 that are solely our responsibility.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Don't you think that the first roundabout that TxDOT would consider would be at Herf and Esser? When you go further out, the speed limit goes up, and you don't put roundabouts on 50-mile-an-hour speeds. They're on 20, 25 mile an hour. So, to think about a roundabout where you got high speed isn't gonna work. Now,
We can discuss all those
that
details.
said, where you do have roundabouts, you need a corridor of roundabouts and not a roundabout and then a signalized intersection, because it screws up the flow.
Right.
The roundabouts, you gotta have a continuous through flow. So that's what we need to look at on these roundabout corridors.
The recommendation, Jonah, for the 46 East group of projects, just the narrative was going to be the committee is favorably impressed by the presentation of Jeremy Cashman, city engineer from Carmel, Indiana. Knows roundabout capital of the world. Carmel has 138 and counting roundabouts at the time of his presentation in 2020. He makes a strong case that roundabouts can be used in a variety of circumstances to ease congestion and improve traffic safety. They're also less expensive to maintain. For these reasons, other metropolitan areas, including Texas cities of Fort Worth, Denton, Midland, McKinney, and Sugar Land, are increasingly using roundabouts. Some members of the committee believe the creation of a roundabout corridor on SH 46 East would serve to calm traffic as it enters the east part of Bernie. Admittedly, such a dramatic paradigm shift would require study and analysis in conjunction with TxDOT, rather than dismiss this novel idea due to lack of supporting engineering resources and time. The committee encourages the city of Bernie to discuss the possibility of creating such a corridor with roundabouts potentially at the woods of Bernie and Herf Road. And then that's
great.
done.
Yeah.
Well, what I would like to do then, I will take y'all's suggestions about pedestrian stuff. I'd ask that you read this narrative part of which I read earlier. Give me your comments on that, and read it as it relates to these. And hopefully we can adopt some of this stuff next time. I'll try to have a better sorting of the other projects and get that to you, and then we'll hopefully get along the way.
Don, there's one thing that I think might be worth including in your discussion on 46 Esser and Herb. I think it became clear from the streetlight model that the traffic, at least from the streetlight, that the majority of the traffic congestion was created from the southward moving and then moving out and then coming back in, even at Main Street and there. I don't know if that's something worth bringing up, because I think there was confusion about that in the original Gateway study that implied that it was northward
north.
moving, right? And I don't know, I've just been thinking about whether having some discussion of what we've learned about the congestion at those sites makes sense, so.
Okay. I don't know that I'm qualified to offer that, but,
Yeah, well, I can't remember what the numbers were. We had those numbers at some
The
point.
streetlight data?
Yeah. It's, I mean, if it's hard to dig up, it's all right. It's just,
Well, you had data too for that, so, and it was corresponding.
my recollection is that people going, and I'll call it north on Herf to go east on 46, that section of Herf backs up.
Yeah.
And that people going west on 46 to go south on Herf.
Yeah.
That causes, those two directions are the ones that are congested.
Correct.
And it's
Yeah.
largely related to school and rush hour.
Yeah.
That much I can put in.
I think that is appropriate. Yeah.
Actually,
There was just like this, there was this concept that was floated from the Gateway study that it was mysterious people going and working in Comfort or
Kerrville.
Fredericksburg or
Well,
Kerrville,
most of
or,
the people going to work in Comfort are mysterious, I can tell
Oh,
you.
there you go, yeah.
True.
But, no, we can do that. One other, Northern, do you have, what narratives do you still lack, do you know? Are you prepared to name names? Bryce, did you get her yours? All right, good.
Bryce got me
I know.
his.
Bobby Bayi got you the one on Upper Balcones.
Yes.
I sent the second, and you got the revisions to the policy statements too.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I think I owe you one yet on all the gates.
Yes, I think that's right. I will go through probably, hopefully this weekend, and populate all the fields with the ones I've been sent, and I'll see what's left over. And I will also send out a link to, or it has to be sent as a link because of the size of the file. So it won't be as an attachment. I'll send the most recent draft of the sheets that I have for everyone to look at and check for edits, check for, if the narrative doesn't quite fit your recollection of what we said, or the maps.
Very good. Next comment or second comment or opportunity for public comment? Mr. Keene?
My name is Nolan Keene. I'm an 18-year resident of 29370 Dewberry Ridge and Fair Oaks Ranch. And I've been part of this, or I guess attended the majority of the meetings since last September here with the study committee. And it's been an interesting deal. I'm glad to see that there was some discussion today about the Herf Road 46 East intersection. I want to just tell you a little personal note that I had here last week. My daughter and 11-year-old grandson had been visiting from Denver, and they're avid cyclists. So I said, okay, we're going to get over to Bernie and hit trail, number 9. We parked at the trailhead across from the Longhorn Burger Place, and then we worked our way through Bernie Park and out to the terminus, came back, and we popped up onto the sidewalk, and at the intersection, we hit both buttons. We crossed Herf Road first, or 46 East. 46 East won, and so I'm in the lead. I start to push off, and just happen to look at my rearview mirror, and here comes a guy around high speed, not looking at me at all. And I'm lucky to be here today. I mean, he missed me by inches. And so I guess what I'm saying, that's a death trap waiting to happen. And somebody the jokesters at TxDOT or whatever, they need to get busy and solve that problem because it ain't going to go away the way it is. The other thing, I hear the discussion, or heard the discussion today about the lines, the arcs, the swatches, or stuff like that. I guess this is the engineer in me speaking. I operate with lines. I guess, if you say, I want to get a line from Bernie to Fair Oaks Ranch, I draw a line. And of course, Pam Hodges, who is a very integral part of this subgroup we have looking at trails, said, the place to put a trail is along the waterways. And that's what San Antonio has done. Gee whiz, I've ridden the majority of those, and believe me, they had some problems to solve along the way. And they did it. Now they're going into the neighborhood. So I don't know. We need to keep pushing on this and get a trail network that connects up the communities and the rest of the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Ms. Gerhart?
Well, two things. One, in reference to your transportation paragraph, I didn't hear it clearly, the first two sentences when it was referenced to 20 acres. Was that excluding anything under 20 acres, or this applied to anything over 20 acres?
It was intended to describe large residential lots, a collection of those, and describe that as fully developed. I mean, you live, I don't know what yours is, 10 acres?
30.
How much?
I'm on 30 acres.
Okay, yeah, I mean, and you're similar, the lots around you are similarly sized except for the one to the south.
Yes.
And so my intent is to kind of in general describe that sort of collection of large estate lots as a fully developed area.
Well, I was just making that distinction because I didn't know if it eliminated one side or the other.
It's not my intent.
At the same time, we've had this discussion before. When it comes to a flag lot, you cannot develop a flag lot unless you are going to build or sell to a child. I don't even believe you can sell to your brother or sister. It has to be a nucleus member. So I do acknowledge that if it's developed, however, you're putting lines, these lines do affect people's situations. And I hate it because this whole situation is not all about me, but I've come to these meetings because it has directly affected me. And most people that aren't even here, if it went, like Mr. Kites was saying, with the bike route, not in my backyard, well, that's your backyard. You don't want it in your backyard. This is a 4-lane, 2-lane highway in my backyard. And so I would just say be cognizant, and thank God you're okay. And my son is a cyclist. He cycles all the time. And it's really not about the transportation plan or people being able to cycle. And I do believe there's going to be less cars on the road and more people are going to be having alternate forms of transportation, even if there's cars that come pick you up. And it's going to, I mean, a 4-wheel drive Tundra right now is pushing 100,000. So, I mean, that's all practical news. However, this is about hurting a person's, the money they put in their property, the future potential for selling the property just as residential, not with anything like that, but it's hurting people. And there are hundreds of people out there that would be affected, that if they actually knew the details and were able to come to the meetings, I'm fortunate that I'm not working on Tuesdays at 2, that I can come and become knowledgeable at what's happening. But I believe in bike trails. I believe in all those wonderful things. But I know I'm going to go on. It's hard because it just seems we take one step forward and then there's 3 steps back and then there's a bunch of lines on the map again. And so, anyway, thanks.
Well,
thank you.
Can I ask you right quick? I mean, so that idea of the curved swath thing, that passes
Well, the swath still goes directly over that same area. I would say make the arcs all go through Cibolo Nature Center with Cibolo Nature Center, and see how many people go, what are you doing? And so what you're doing is just reinforcing this transportation plan that technically, according to the opinions of the policy that's going out, technically will never happen unless somebody develops. And like in my case, my neighbors around, even if I sold tomorrow to somebody who wanted to develop, they couldn't do it. It's not going to happen. I mean, but it is hurting people personally. And I've been fighting this a long time, way longer. When I bought that property in 2009, I was told it was dead by Kendall County Abstract, person from the city of Bernie. And in 2013, guess what? My property was on the market, and my buyer walked away and said, they've just put a line right through the property. I'm walking away. And so that kicked off everything. And so that's what I'm saying. I love the idea of bike trails. If I would have won the $1 billion the other night, I would have donated the whole property to the Audubon Society to promote birds and everything. You know, I believe in philanthropic ideas. I believe in 5 years, the new guard and the young people are going to be more cognizant of our personal resources, and we'll have a whole new perspective. But right now, I'm afraid there's going to be decisions made that won't come to fruition that are going to direct a lot of people personally. Anyway, that's it.
Ms. McCarthy.
Wanda McCarthy, Ammon Road. I reiterate what Violisa said. I agree with that commentary. I'm not trying to sell my property, so I haven't lost 3 sales as they have. But I would like to reference all of you to listen in retrospect to the meeting that was held last night, Planning and Zoning, regarding Park House. And the commissioners on that board ended up with commentary that was resounding what the majority, what I think is the silent majority in this county feel. We keep adding roads. We keep going and doing deals with developers. We keep the TxDOT idea of, hey, let's get them moving and open up more roads. And what they said was, we're changing the attitude of this county to the detriment of the people that created this county, that put their life, their investment, their time into this county. And the vision of people making decisions is more in line with big pockets, developers, and so forth. And they said no. And I hope that all of you would listen to that because, again, it reiterates a lot of our feelings of put on the brakes, consider the people that made this community. And yes, we need help. We need to do some smart planning, but don't run over the top of the people that made this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy. Anyone else in the audience? Okay. Mr. Co-Chair, you have any closing comments?
None. See you in 2 weeks.
All right. Enjoy your time off. We'll be looking
Sir?
forward to your executive summary. Denise Deaver.
Yes, sir. I'm one of the unlucky homeowners that lives in a developed property that had, at one point, I don't know if it's still there or not with their new update, but I had the City of Bernie thoroughfare plan going through my side yard and between myself and my neighbor. And my neighbor's house now has a swimming pool. It also has an additional outbuilding of some sort and a bunch of other stuff. So if they have to take that line through our property, and then my next neighbor to the west, then it's going to go through the HERF property. So I'm assuming that rethink is what you're talking about, not going through existing developments. But what you weren't thinking about is going to the east on where I live on Spring Road is that those are also a community. Those 5-acre lots, those 10-acre lots that are all along there, then there's a ranch entrance, then there's more 5-acre and 10-acre lots. We're a community, just like the folks out on Friendly Hills. They're a community. You know, Spring Creek Road is a dead-end road. I live on a dead-end road. Yes, it butts up to the awful construction noise of Esperanza, but it is still a dead-end road at this point. The only way that they can get through to us is to go through a ranch, and then you're going to have them on a road going through a community that is a 30-mile-an-hour county road with a 90-degree turn in it and dips. So I think, you know, not only looking at, just as Lisa and Wanda said, the flag properties, but we're a community too out here. And we're a pretty tight community, actually. So I think that when they do these thoroughfare plans, that they actually need to come out and get to know where they're trying to put a road through instead of looking at a map. And it goes right along with the trail plans and the mobility plans as to who are you trying to move and where are you trying to move them to. And look at the neighborhoods that they're going through. The more we develop, the more these rural areas are going to become tighter neighborhoods, not less. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Debo. Anyone else on Zoom? Bitsy Pratt, are you trying to wave? You'd like to say something, or how's she feeling?
Well, hello, Don. Good afternoon, and
There
good
you are.
afternoon, committee members. Yeah, I'm glad we're going to roll a little bit of the discussion about some of the projects we talked about into the next meeting. In particular, I was intrigued to make sure, or it seems like I heard that we would make sure that all of these different recommended projects falling into short-term and long-term buckets would be based on need. The last thing that Denise said, who are we moving, where are we moving them, and why are we moving them? And I think that might help clarify. There are some of the projects that you mentioned that take people in directions that are very, very helpful, but they're not necessarily based on short-term need. And I would just be leery of saying, and that's what I thought I heard to begin with, that if a development occurs, that would be moved to a short-term bucket. But I think you can maybe do some different things like set-asides or identifying areas within a development that are of interest for longer-term projects that might allow you to make those connections and not necessarily in the short term. So that was the only thing that I observed and heard tonight or today, and I do plan on being there in 2 weeks.
All right, we look forward to seeing you. Get well soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Anybody else? Mr. Adelstein, Ms. Couch? Okay. Does members of the committee have anything to offer? We'll meet again in 2 weeks. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All righty.